Good morning and welcome to the monthly meeting of the Greenwich Board of Selectmen. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning and welcome to this regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen. It is a public meeting. It is not a public hearing. The chair reserves the right to call upon any interested attendee to comment on any particular matter that is germane to the board's agenda today. There are copies of the meeting's agenda on the table when you come in, as well as two sets of the materials that are before the board for consideration. Today's meeting's agenda is a relatively light one, and so we have no executive session items, which is a blessing, and we have one piece of old business for which there will be updates. The balance of the agenda pertains to nominations and appointments. Item number 2 on the agenda is approval of minutes from the meeting that was held on July the 30th. Are there any corrections, adjustments to those minutes? If there are no changes to those minutes as they are presented, is there a motion for approval?
So moved. Seconded.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
So that's item number 3, first Selectmen updates. There's relatively a few since last week. The first one is on Monday with the support and good work of Senior Management Analyst Melissa Jones. We were able to launch the pilot of Access Greenwich. This is a mobile application which can be downloaded to your smartphones, and essentially it is a resource for residents to be able to submit inquiries. Specifically, the pilot is being undertaken in the Department of Parks and Recreation, and that pilot will be evaluated over the course of the next 5 months, and once evaluated, the intention is to expand its application throughout the town. I do want to thank Melissa for her leadership and work on this. It's been a long time coming. I do want to also thank the BET, particularly its Human Resources Committee, who was an integral part of working with our office to support this initiative. The initiative is really part of an overall effort to improve the quality of service by our employees to the residents, and certainly I do think it's also keeping with the times in which we live. So again, if you're interested, there's a frequently asked question sheet about it in guiding you through downloading the app to your smartphone. Some past meetings this week, we had the monthly staff meeting. We were reviewing our regular activities, which is a report from the First Selectmen Safety Council, which looks at stats related to the workers' comp and safety initiatives. We now have the permanent position of a safety coordinator. It had been a part-time position. Thanks to the support of the BET and RTM, we were able to institute a full-time position, which justified based upon the sheer number of claims that the town has experienced over the course of several years. And we certainly are happy with the performance of that individual. In addition, we heard several updates. We hear updates from every town department during the course of this meeting, and one of them that stands out is that at the Nathaniel Witherell, they are presently at full capacity in census, so much so that there is a wait to get into the short-term rehab. This may be ameliorated a little by the addition of some additional short-term beds. They are in the process of converting a couple, I think actually 5, 2-bedroom suites to single beds in directing them over to the short-term care. So Alan Brown is very encouraged by the trend. I know that the financials of the Witherell are of interest to all of us, but nonetheless, I do think the fact that they're at full census is a true testament to the quality of the care of the facility. So stay tuned. I think we'll continue to see Witherell as a desired location for both short and long-term care. I had a meeting with the two citizen members of the retirement board. Recently reappointed was John Chadwick, who is presently the chair, and Larry Simon. The purpose of the meeting was to address some issues that have arisen over the role that the board plays in relationship to the retirement plan administrator. Ms. Atia Jones began about 9 months ago in this role, and she is working diligently to not only acclimate herself to the town and its sort of circuitous system pension program, but also some of the other issues that the board deals with. And I thought the meeting was productive and helped, I think, iron out some of the communication issues between the retirement board, the administrator, and more importantly, the director of HR, who oversees that position. Also had a meeting, an introductory meeting with Bob Stacy. He is the new Human Resources Director for the Board of Education. He comes to the position with a depth of experience in both the public and private sector. I believe he was most recently with the New Britain Public School District, and certainly coming to Greenwich, where the role is modified in that the BOE HR director does not have direct responsibility for contract negotiations. The town has a labor relations director for that, but I think Mr. Stacy is going along the right steps and getting familiar with all of the people that he must work with in order to achieve his objectives. Coming up, future meetings, August 11th is the Community Development Block Grant public hearing in the Town Hall meeting room. This is a requirement under the program, and once that public hearing has been held and closed, I have the responsibility for submitting the recommendations from the First Selectman's office to the BET, in which they'll have another public hearing and act on it, and then it ultimately goes to the representative town meeting when they approve it, and they will have a hearing as well. There are a couple issues that have been identified by those who have submitted requests for funding. We heard from the Glenville Volunteer Fire Company regarding some dive equipment, or not dive equipment, it was pump equipment. I think that one we resolved in the sense that we directed them to really work with me particularly, to have that really funded through the general fund budget rather than take monies from the community development funds. The other issue that has surfaced that we'll hear more about is the Greenwich Historical Society is in the process of submitting plans for improvements to their facility over on Strickland Road. One of the elements of that improvement centers upon the installation of an elevator to make their facility ADA compliant. No doubt a very worthy request, but there's a couple of issues pertaining to it, and one of them is due to the timing and nature when they would actually expend the funds in relation to the program year. So I anticipate on the 11th we'll be hearing about that, but important to let people know that a lot of thought goes into this by all 25 citizen volunteers who sit on the advisory committee to the First Selectman, but also on the part of the professional staff in the First Selectman's office. So that's August 11th at 7 p.m. On August 12th, we'll be administering the oath to several Casca Fire Police members. This will take place at 7 p.m. at the Casca Fire Station, and that's on the volunteer side. On the professional side, career side, we have a swearing in for 2 fire lieutenants and then 2 firefighters. This is the result of 2 retirements. We do not often see retirements in fire as frequently as we do with the police. but nonetheless, we are seeing a couple this coming month, and therefore we'll have 2 new firefighters and 2 new lieutenants. Finally, future meetings. There will be a meeting on August 10th to discuss the preparations for the Greenwich 375th Parade. This is taking place on Sunday, September 27th. It is meant to be a community-wide celebration and has been under the able leadership of Davida Strackbine. So we will be meeting to work out some of the details pertaining to logistics and approvals for different type of things, such as they're desirous of hanging a banner across Greenwich Avenue. How do you do it? Are we in compliance with various ordinances and things of that nature? So that's on the 10th. We're also having a follow-up meeting with the chamber. The professional staff here at the town was very thorough in reviewing the requirements for sidewalk sales days. The police chief has an integral role in that approval. We did have some concerns this year that were expressed by professional staff out in the field and by those of us who observed the activities. So we'll be sitting down with the chamber to review those regulations and what process should be followed next year to avert any issues. Finally, there's a Western Connecticut Council of Government meeting in New Canaan. They were the host community this month, and this is a in-person meeting. The last month it was done telephonically. This month it will actually be in person. That concludes the updates. Item number 4, old business. For those who are here on the 30th, we had a request by a resident regarding an appeal of his mooring location. Over the course of the period of that meeting to today, there's been quite a bit of dialogue that's gone on between both the individual resident, the various town departments. Specifically, I want to again extend my appreciation, and I think the board's, to Denise Savageau, our conservation director, who was very earnest in going out and assisting us with addressing one of the issues that had surfaced during the course of the discussions and the denial of this mooring location. That was the location of an osprey nest on a private property adjacent or in proximity to this specific mooring. Denise was very clear at the meeting then that this was not an issue based upon DEEP's regulations, but even went so far as to take wonderful photographs for us and do further research. So Denise, I just want to thank you publicly again for something you really didn't have to do. You did it because you're a good steward and you wanted to help us understand and educate us on this. In addition, Amina Ahmad of our town law department has been really leading the discussions on this and keeping the focus on what are the requirements of this body, the harbor master, and if we ever are to specialize, I think I've individually appointed you as our maritime attorney on staff, and a waterfront community like Greenwich should have a maritime attorney. So think about the prospects of the future, with coastal community. So where are we? We've had quite a bit of...
Where are we? That's a good question.
We've had quite a bit of dialogue, and so as was reported in the paper, the issue appeared to be resolved, but not so fast. The issue really is with the coordinates that are provided to the harbor master. The coordinates were not reflective of the location that the resident had intended. We actually verified that through our GIS, thanks to Amina. Carrie Kennelly went in the GIS and plotted those, and so we're going to hear from Mr. Zubek shortly if you have any comment, but Ms. Ahmad was very kind to enumerate the chronology of events and really where we stand, and I don't want to necessarily predispose the outcome of this discussion, but I think you articulated very nicely that there is a practical issue that can be worked out if there's open communication. And I'm quoting from your memo to me, which I do so hopefully not in jeopardy of client-attorney as is rooted, but I think this is very well stated. And it's the last paragraph, which essentially says that the issue can be worked out between the harbor master and the individual requesting a location. If the alternative location by the harbor master is unacceptable because it is proposed by the harbor master is unacceptable because it's too far, another location should be provided that is acceptable. Also, taking into consideration if depth is an issue, depth is a regulatory requirement of deep, not having a vessel sit in, I can't think of the word, the sound bed, the bed of the, and so that would be something that would be within the harbor master's in deep's prerogative. So we have really no action that we can take today, from what I can see from what you've provided to us. But Mr. Zobek is here, and I appreciate your presence here. Perhaps you can, if you'd like to, you're welcome to comment. I do think simply we're just looking for a certainty in reconciliation as to the GPS coordinates, because that seems to be what's been at issue over the last several days, is a reconciliation to where your mooring has been and what those coordinates are, and then which ones have been provided that place the mooring well outside even the jurisdictional boundaries of the town. So I guess we're not geography majors here, but we do need that. So did you want to comment today, or? And I'm sorry, but I also want to say, Denise, thank you for being, did you want to comment today, or? I thought what you did was great. Thank you.
I'm Chuck Zobek. Before we get off of Denise, sorry, Denise, I didn't mean it that way. Could you say whether or not you had any success finding out whether that osprey nest is registered with the town or legal?
We haven't looked, we haven't confirmed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, some observations since our last meeting here last week. It appears that we have moved on from the osprey nest and the depth issue, though now I don't know, the original claims for moving the, or for having the denial. Now we have the coordinates sideshow. Mr. McMillan has made a huge issue with this. Now, he knew exactly where that mooring is because he's moved it twice. Any rational person would take his boat to the marker, turn on his GPS, and read the numbers. Voila, mooring location. But wait a minute. He can't do that because he moved the marker for the second time without my permission yesterday. Then we have the pinched fairway sideshow. This is the pinched fairway relates to the contention that the harbor is too narrow for large boats to get in should there be an emergency at someone's dock. Now, pinched, from one side, the narrowest side of the harbor in Indian Harbor to the next side over on Windrose Lane or whatever that is at that point, is 340 feet across, the narrowest part of the harbor. Now, as someone pointed out, if you can't navigate that, you ought to take up golf. It's a huge area. Then we have fairway. The definition I get of fairway is a navigable channel in a harbor. Now, Mr. McMillan knows better than anybody that subject since he spent about 2 years fighting over it. And by the way, that channel is all the way on the far side of the cove from my mooring. Then we have the predictable use sideshow. The predictable use refers to the fact that, or his idea that if he gives me approval to the mooring, that we're going to have lots of raft ups on that mooring. Now, I have stated my use of that mooring to be able to get my boat, to get into my house from my boat by dinghy at low tide, and number two, to get the boat off of the dock in any storm situation where it's at risk. And also, the retired policemen have agreed not to make use of rafting there. So, you know, well, those are some of the things that have come up since. Getting back a minute to the coordinates, if what we're trying to do is confirm the coordinates, is it not possible to have the police boat go out and look at it? Oh, incidentally, the marker is not there right now, but I can get it back in a very close spot to where it was, though I would hope that if I do that, that you would inform Mr. McMillan or order him not to move it again without my permission.
I think, you know, and I would request Attorney Ahmad assist us on this, but I think our belief was that by taking the step to have the police go out and do it, we are perhaps setting a precedent. I mean, we were intending to go out and look at it, using that as our resource and to physically get there, since we don't have boats ourselves. But having them actually then do the work that ultimately, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that you would naturally have a mooring vendor do and certify the location, would create perhaps a wrong impression. Do you want to comment? If you would come forward, please.
And Mr. Zubek, before are you saying then you want police or someone to the coordinates that you submit?
I have the correct coordinates of that mooring, and I can get back to it from my boat. I've already done the work. All I'm asking is that be confirmed, that my figures are correct. I'm not asking that they do the work. Yeah, I don't recall. It may be in a case of the GPS not being operative at the time. I honestly, I don't know the answer to your question. But anyway, that was my thought. Incidentally, you bring up an interesting point. Could we have the mooring vendor confirm that location?
I'm saying that's what I would believe to be a proper step, because they have to actually go out there and place them, and they have to be able to determine where they place things, and then Ian has to certify them. So I would prefer the town, through its police, not do that work. I don't know if it's really proper, and have the vendor who would drop it provide it and give some written documentation.
Okay, my only point is I am sure of the coordinates that the town has right now are correct. Now, how we confirm those, I mean, this is not the first time the harbor master has raised this issue with somebody else who we made the same claim that their coordinates were in the middle of Long Island Sound. So, you know, can we trust him? I don't know, but there's a past history of him.
But I'll even take it one step further. Even to me, this should not be that difficult. I mean,
exactly.
But here this shouldn't be difficult in the sense Ian and you will at some point agree on the coordinates. I think the issue, though, what could be back in front of this board is once you do agree that the coordinates that you sent are verifiable and are true, I'm assuming he then will be back to him not approving it based on birds, based on safety, based on depth, based on whatever. But here's my point. The point is what he is giving you as an alternative, as you said last time, you're not willing to accept, correct?
That's correct.
So it's going to be brought back to this board then, I think, even when we agree on the coordinates. Am I missing something, or?
Right, he's already moved, from what you said, he's already moved it to the location he was desirous of, irrespective of this. I don't know what those coordinates are, you didn't tell us, but one of the things that I think it's important to point out is the matter of the osprey and the was adjudicated, and it has no bearing on this, so that's off the table. In fact, I think Mr. McMillan was astute enough, I would hope, to listen to his appointing authority, which is the state, who gave him clear guidance as to what the issues are and are not. And the issues are not the osprey. They perhaps are the depth, and I think that's what you're basically summarizing for us, is that that has to be validated based upon knowing the specific coordinates. And that we don't know. I mean, we don't have anything right now in front of us to be able to consider or to adjudicate the matter.
On the second issue of depth, as I pointed out in an email to you, Peter, that is so laughable, because in that very spot, I had a sailboat for 10 years that drew 5.5 feet. Now, I'd like to see a sailboat that draws 5.5 feet sitting in 2 feet of water. You know, we're taking his word for it. My depth figures show at least 7 feet at low tide. His show 2 feet, which incidentally is down from the figure of 6 feet that he gave at the last commission meeting. So, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I think in the next, we're meeting again on the 20th, I believe. 21st? It's a Friday, okay. That we'll perhaps have all of this reconciled if in fact it isn't resolved between the two of you, and we'll Ms. Ahmad, I wanted you to actually comment.
What's there, I mean, to reconcile, but are you, once again, I'm not clear on something. Are you saying the coordinates you submitted are the correct ones? So what's there to reconcile? Are you going to come back with coordinates that are correct? I'm still confused that,
The coordinates,
If I could just
yeah.
respond to
That's why I
that.
wanted you to speak, because it's,
We did get coordinates from Mr. Zubek yesterday, I believe, yesterday afternoon, and I had the GIS people, Town GIS, take a look at those coordinates, and just this morning, they did get back to me and say they're very similar to the coordinates submitted over the weekend, and they're still in the area that was not in Greenwich. So
I'm sorry, what?
so the GIS staff looked at the coordinates that we got yesterday, and they confirmed this morning, just a short time ago, that those coordinates are not in the area we're talking about. So at some point, I think, and it's really a simple matter, I think.
Yeah.
First of all, the harbor master, if it's true that he knew where this lobster pot was and has moved it yesterday, the harbor master would know where he moved it from, the original location. Simple matter of the harbor master telling us where that was in terms of the coordinates. Or Mr. Zubek going back, as you suggested, Mr. Tessie, having his mooring vendor confirm the coordinates of the original location. So at least then we know what area we're talking about.
So let's be clear then on something. So Mr. McMillan approved a mooring when he gets back to us and said a mooring's been approved and everything we think is okay, he approved a mooring not in Greenwich.
Right, that's exactly right. So the email we got on Tuesday afternoon from Mr. McMillan was addressed to me and simply said, as of noon today, August 4, 2015, I approve this requested mooring location of, gives the coordinates for Mr. Zubek's use. So in that email, the coordinates were the ones provided by Mr. Zubek. We found out later in the day that those coordinates were actually not located in Greenwich waters. So you are correct. When the harbor master said he had approved the location, he, I assume, knew that those weren't located in Greenwich. Yes.
so I mean, again, I
So
think.
it all comes down to, for this board to do anything, I think
We need correct
the board
coordinates.
needs to know exactly what location we're talking about. Now, you did see at your last meeting a map, despite the confusion over the coordinates, you did see a map that the harbor master presented to you, which showed you a location for Mr. Zubek's mooring, gave you a distance of 120 or 140 feet, I forget which it was, from the osprey nest. And Mr. McMillan said that that location had 2 feet of water at low tide. So despite this back and forth banter about the coordinates, somehow those were able to be plotted. So I think there may be a simple resolution here. I don't know, maybe I'm just making it too simple, but there's got to be a resolution here in terms of what location are we talking about. Then we can see what the nautical charts show in terms of the depth at low tide. But right now, this board doesn't have that information, even though Mr. McMillan was able to plot the location on a map and tell you it's 120 feet from an osprey nest. So
Yeah.
I'm missing something here.
Not just you.
I'm at a loss.
Yeah.
And in terms of sending the police boat out, I think you already spoke to that, Mr. Chairman, but it just is not a good precedent to use taxpayer money and police resources to confirm the location of one mooring for a private citizen. Then you get into that debate every time, are we going to send the police out to go confirm the location of a mooring?
Yeah, and again, and to that point, I think we were availing ourselves to it, to be clear, because we have no physical means to
Yes.
get there to do our job, which was to adjudicate the matter. I suppose we could ask Parks and Rec, too. They have boats. I know Denise and I were on one of them a long time ago to look at the Cascab Channel with former Commissioner McCarthy. That was maybe like 5 years ago. But anyway, if we have to, we'll make arrangements
Yes,
by
and-
somehow. I know that I can't swim. I can assure you of that. I'll sink, so.
And that's a very different situation in terms of having the board go out there and use the police boat to go take a look at the site. That's a very different
Yeah.
circumstance and situation
So where it
from
stands
sending
now,
it out.
does Mr. Zubek then is going to report back to you or a different type of coordinates? Or once again, are you saying the ones you're giving are correct? This is what I'm still not understanding. Yeah, see, this is going to be the,
Here's a
Yeah.
chart.
this is the dispute.
This is a chart of the Erie. Now here, this is Indian Harbor and the Osprey Nest is over here. This is Windrose Lane over on this side. Now if, get rid of that. Okay. The spot in the middle tells what the depth is at low tide. Can you tell me what that figure says? Right near my,
8.9.
okay, that's low tide. Now,
Is this the location or are we talking the depth here?
depth and depth, the depth relative to the location, okay? Now, if you look at the coordinates on there, you will find that those coordinates are very, very close to the figures that I gave you yesterday, and they're within a very short distance of where I said it was.
But may I make a suggestion? Perhaps after you're done here with us, if you can perhaps show this to GIS and have them look at it, that then we could perhaps reconcile. I don't know what application that is and so forth. But again, I'd leave it to the professionals to make the judgment. I mean, Denise, you could even look at it. You're very adept with GIS.
Yeah, I can go down to GIS.
Or look what he's showing us to see, because that's really the fundamental issue about reconciling the coordinates.
That's the depth.
Yeah.
And the reason why I keep asking is because it changes how we're going to go forward. If you're saying what you're giving is correct and we're saying not, I guess we're the adjudicating body that says, no, you have to produce coordinates that or whatever. Or are we saying, do you now come back with a new set of coordinates? I think that's the million-dollar question right now, anyway. So,
Okay, I will do that, and I will contact the mooring provider to go over and get his set of coordinates, just so that we have a third party. Also, don't you find it kind of interesting that Mr. McMillan can't locate my mooring, but he can make the statement is too close to an osprey nest and in 2 feet of water? Well, anyway, stay tuned for the next installment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Denise, welcome.
resolved by December, no? Too cold to go out.
I just wanted to make the statement in terms of map versus in-field. You know, when we're dealing with, for example, maps showing navigation and depth, those are guidance maps. Hopefully they're, fairly accurate so we don't have boaters getting stuck. But they are not, especially when you get into smaller harbors and whatever, you really do need to use exact depths. And I think if you go out and you look at that with depth finders, you will find that what's on the navigational charts is not always 100% accurate, and that anyone with a depth finder on their boat would be able to do that. I don't know if the harbor master has access to that, but basically they're a lot of fishermen and whatever have them on their boats now where they're looking, because they're looking for fish and whatever, and they could easily get the depth. And a lot of folks who are, so that they don't get caught in these channels that need to be dredged, have these on their boats as well. So it's a fairly common tool to be able to figure out exactly the depth in that channel. So it's not something that should be hard to do. I would think probably even somebody installing moorings may actually have that as well. One of the things I think you'll find in that channel is that where it says 2 feet may not be correct. So just using the navigational maps, I would think the harbor master would know that those are not always, as accurate, and should not be the tool that we use. We always, and the same thing in land use, we don't, just look at maps in terms of where the survey boundary is. Then we have to go physically out in the field and say, here's where the survey is, and this is what's actually in the field. And that's just pretty common standard practice. I also want to say, in terms of using GPS and location out in the field, sometimes I know it gets frustrating, but sometimes, depending on what's going on, and the accuracy of your GPS and the strength of the signal, you can get misinformation. So it's not always correct just going out and saying like, oh, I can easily do a GPS. There are times when your signal gets jammed, you get miscoordinates and whatever. So that's pretty common. So even though, we should be able to get the resolved, and I agree with Ms. Ahmad that it's very simple, that if someone's picking up a marker and moving it, they should be able to know where they're picking it up from, and should probably, since that's the area we're discussing where we want the mooring to go, could have easily taken coordinates there and see how they match up. So I just wanted to let people know that, because I've done some of the work. We've got GPS coordinate, GPS equipment here with for our GIS department that we actually use out in the field. So like if I'm locating osprey nests, or actually like we were doing some work with the Shellfish Commission and looking at, marking the shellfish beds and whatever, you can actually use those. So we have that equipment that we can use if we need to make those determinations. Thank you.
Great, Denise, thank you for your professional judgment. And I think if you could, Ms. Ahmad, one of the requests I would have is for, obviously, Mr. Zubek's going to seek a vendor to get the coordinates, but I mean, the harbor master should produce, in fact, where he removed the
lobster pot.
the pot, I'm saying, the
Our
pot
goal
from.
is to-
He should be able to tell us that. I mean, that's as Ms. Savageau points out, I mean, that's a fact. I mean,
Right.
where was it?
Right.
Yeah. All right.
So,
Our goal is to get this done by snowfall for the next.
yes,
Yeah.
is there any?
He needs to come back with.
If I'm going to locate my mooring area and put a marker back, I really need for you to instruct Mr. McMillan not to move it again, or we're lost again. Can you do that?
Well, this is in a public domain, and there are a number of people in attendance, media included. I think I would ask our assistant town attorney to convey that message in a civil and proper way to adjudicate a matter. And again, if I think it's not adhered to, it's another testament to the individual's behavior as to not wanting to cooperate.
Thank you.
It's the best way I could put it in most. Okay, so new business, we have no new business. Under item number 6, appointments and nominations, we first have a professional staff position that has been vacant. That position has been the Deputy Commissioner of Public Works. Dave Thompson retired earlier this year after many years of good service to the citizens of the town. The Department of Public Works has worked closely with the Department of Human Resources to post the position and to interview several candidates. There was a interview panel. I believe, Mr. Brannigan, you were part of that panel, as well as Mrs. DeLuca, and perhaps was there someone else, or just two? And Miss, of course, well, you're a given, of course. You're the commish, as they call you. You're the commish. But we were ably assisted by two of our top senior professionals. And so before us today is a recommendation from the commissioner to, for the board to confirm, per charter, James Michael to the position of Deputy Commissioner of Public Works at a starting salary of $133,000 annually, effective immediately. The position of Deputy Commissioner of Public Works is a non-represented unclassified position allocated to the managerial confidential class level 9 salary range. The town, in accordance with the town's managerial and confidential compensation plan, shall determine future salary considerations. So to give a little bit of background, Mr. Michael has served as the Town of Greenwich Department of Public Works Chief Engineer since January 2011. As Chief Engineer, Mr. Michael plans and directs all activities of DPW's engineering division, providing in-house design, project management, and engineering assistance to other divisions, departments, boards, and agencies. Mr. Michael manages the development and implementation of major capital improvement programs with an annual budget of $5 to $10 million. From 1995 to 2010, Mr. Michael worked in the private sector in the civil engineering field. His focus areas included land development, stormwater management, and traffic design. He worked with both private and municipal clients. Mr. Michael was also an active business manager as he was a partner in a small consulting firm serving the Chicago suburbs. He brought organizational and information technology skills developed in that role to the department when he joined. Mr. Michael graduated with a Bachelor's of Science degree in Civil Engineering from the University of Illinois and a Master's of Business Administration from the Keller Graduate School. Mr. Michael completed the American Public Works Association Engineering Leaders Academy in 2014. Additionally, Mr. Michael is licensed with the state of Connecticut as a professional engineer. The search process began in May of 2015. The top most qualified 4 candidates were interviewed, and Mr. Michael was selected. So again, Ms. Siebert, would you like to comment? Because this is your recommendation to us.
That's right. So what I can just say for you folks today is I think Jim will be a very good candidate. I mean, we know him in the department. You folks know him as well. He's done a lot of very good work for us. So we're looking forward to that. And he's sorry he couldn't be here because he's actually out at that West Cog meeting doing good work for us now, so that we don't have to be there.
Yeah.
So I think that's sort of just a quick one.
Great, thank you. And I would say, in complimenting you, that you have done a nice job of identifying and bringing well-qualified people to your department, and I think it's served the town well in all areas, both professionally and in their personal skills.
We have to thank Human Resources for that too as well. They've been very helpful.
Great.
I want to thank Katie and Ben because that was very helpful as well.
Yes, thank you. So at this time, I'd like to make a motion for the resolution. The Board of Selectmen appoint James Michael to the position of Deputy Commissioner of Public Works.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Congratulations.
And congratulations, yes, Jim. We have been working through the remaining board and commission positions over the last several months. We have several to complete, notably the Witherall. We still have the Housing Authority, which is a direct appointment. And today we are going to be taking up Witherall, and I believe we'll be taking up Planning and Zoning. In terms of Planning and Zoning, obviously we have one opening in the regular member position, having 3 individuals essentially being considered for this position. Whomever is nominated still has to garner approval by the representative town meeting. So in terms of process of filling the alternate, I think we have learned from past experience that we will not fill the alternate position until such time as the regular position is filled, because we cannot presume the outcome of the deliberation. So we'll be running, and I say that, Katie, in a sense, because we're trying to keep you well-staffed, but sequencing is always an issue with this. And we've had this issue with where we learned it very, perhaps, what's the word? The School of Hard Knocks with wetlands. I think we had that where we elevated someone, but then they weren't activated on, and so. So that being said, at this time I will entertain any motions.
I move that Andrew Fox be moved up to a regular membership on the Planning and Zoning Commission. Mr. Fox lives at 50 Fairfield Road. He was appointed in October 2013 as an alternate member with a filling out Fred Brooks's term to 3/14. He was reappointed to 3/2017, March 2017. Mr. Fox has a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering. He has 32 years in the field of building and developing. He has been the chair of the Nathaniel Woodrow Building Committee. He was the chair of the Eagle Hill Building Committee. He was instrumental in the expansion of the Greenwich Country Day. He has an appreciation of the need for historic presentation, and I think he'll be a good addition to the regular membership on the Planning and Zoning.
Okay, thank you. The name of H. Andrew Fox has been moved. I will second that nomination. And for purpose of discussion, and we'll say that we have an abundance of riches in some respects, and that we had before us 3 individuals who have been serving for varying durations of time as alternate members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Each brings to the table very specific skills. In Mr. Fox, we have an engineer who has contributed greatly to the improvement of several both public and private enterprises in the town. We have Ms. Raymer, who is a very renowned attorney and a civic volunteer who has devoted several years to the commission and getting an integral knowledge of the regulations. And we have Mr. McRae, whom is our most recent member, whom has served, which I did not realize until meeting with him, almost 14 years on the Architectural Review Committee, which is an advisory position to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So in many respects, whomever advances forward is capable and able to contribute more fully as a regular member. For me, it really came down to the timing. And at this time, in my judgment, as an individual member of the board, I believe Mr. Fox can lend himself to some of the work that the commission is doing, particularly related to regulation review and an application of review that our new town planner has undertaken to address many of the concerns that residents have brought forth. And I've really agonized over this, but as I sat back and I went through and looked at the work that the Economic Advisory Committee was doing in raising a number of the concerns centered around process in the regulations and the unintended consequence of those regulations. And I think based upon his experience working with several of these large projects on a public level and privately working in the industry, he could perhaps be of value in the short term as you work to bring this forward. This is a very difficult decision in that all 3 are wonderful individuals, and certainly I anticipate we'll be moving forward in the future as we see other vacancies.
Mr. Chairman, I move Nancy. Is here, it's extensive. I do have some prepared remarks in regards to this nomination.
Well, there's one motion on the floor. He moved it, it's seconded. So we have to adjudicate that motion first, but you certainly can comment on.
Sure, if you can. Mr. Chairman, Selectman Toner, what should be, in my opinion, a routine appointment to the Planning and Zoning Commission, arguably one of the most powerful, influential boards in Greenwich, has now, at minimum, alters the mechanism in which for years, if not decades, guided the selectmen in determining what alternate member will be next promoted to a full member. Now, while I fully understand and agree that the executive board, the Board of Selectmen, should reserve the right to nominate who each individual selectman thinks is the right person at the right time that will contribute in the most positive way. With that said, however, unless there is a compelling reason, one based on verifiable facts, that for reason not to promote an alternate member next in line, then I do think the question of precedence should take place here. Nancy Raymer, who has commanded the respect of the commission itself, her constituents that she serves, elected officials, elected leadership. Nancy has committed herself to being the best board member she could possibly be, and that is evident by the quantitative, documented amount of hours, hundreds, that she has demonstrated in work. So again, I will say this should be a routine appointment, that this board should be following routine past precedents and procedure. I ask that this board take into consideration my comments and advocacy for Ms. Raymer, and also ask this board consider the negative impact of not promoting a qualified, diligent, respected member of the commission. She is respected by all, like I said, both Democrats, Republicans, and independents. So, Mr. Chairman, if this board, or Mr. Chairman and Mr. Toner, if this board does deviate from past practice without, in my opinion, a valid reason, other boards could face the possibility of a cast of shadow subject to, in some case, in politics, could be subject to lobbying, whether or not someone wants this person or not this person. In fact, this other boards could be subject to various chair people wanting, for their reasons, a person that they deem fit. So I believe we should follow precedents and follow process that, especially this board, has been doing so as long as I've been here for 6 years. Nancy Raymer has earned this promotion and nomination. And with that, normal, routine process and precedents should be followed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you, and very passionate and well articulated. Further discussion, any comments? Yes, certainly.
I'm not used to being on this side.
Well, welcome. We always like to see you.
You have to identify yourself. Yeah.
My name is Margarita Albin. I was aware of it usually being based on seniority as an alternate, and I'm having a hard time with this because I have every confidence in this Board of Selectmen, and I can only remind you that the last time that a woman was up to move from alternate to regular, a very similar issue came up, and another person was moved forward, and there was a great deal of drama over it, and the woman finally became a regular, and that woman was me. And that was the last time we had a woman that came up. And I'm wondering why it is that for so long we only had one woman, another woman is about to come up, and she gets pushed out of the way. As Mr. Marzullo said, these are all 3 good candidates. I don't see why Nancy, given her seniority, how hard she's worked, would not be moved forward. And it disturbs me that this precedent exists. I would understand if you chose to move a Republican forward, because Mr. Brooks is a Republican, and I believe you would be able to place another Republican. But bypassing that, and again, our protocol, the precedent we've had, especially because you are looking at 3 good people who will in time move as is appropriate. And I guess that's it. I thought it was Initially, when they were going to pass me by, I thought it was because I was a minority, but now I'm wondering. So I'm disturbed by it. Again, I trust you guys. I know you're all great and very responsible, and I know you followed good process. But my heart's broken. And I don't know what I'll do with it.
Well, I certainly will appreciate your comments. I happen to disagree in terms of some of the tone that you've interjected into it, because we nominate hundreds of people over the course of our time, and I think ultimately it is a judgment.
And my experience is only on planning and
Right,
zoning. you
and
know
so
that.
just in terms of the conversation about what is precedent or process, I mean, it really has been a practice, but it is not a requirement. And again, and when you come down to, we talk about elected boards, competition for elected boards, what is the authorities? Ultimately, every person who steps forward has to make a series of judgments at a given time. No question, this is a difficult decision, because personally, I like all three people. In fact, I nominated Mrs. Raymer the last time and was very proud to do so. And I say that with all candor and seriousness, because I have profound respect for her. It is a matter of timing, in terms of Andy has devoted himself now to wanting to help address some of these issues related to regulation improvement. As a regular member, in my judgment, perhaps he can facilitate more readily as a full-time member. We're talking about a period of essentially 7 months. If you think about the process of appointment, he still has to go to the RTM. That won't happen until September. So theoretically, he won't really be seated until October. Now we go full circle into next year, presuming whoever's sitting here, the folks on the P&Z will be, that Board of Selectmen will determine who will replace Mr. Heller, who has very much publicly said he's not continuing. So if that next board opts to, they can nominate in January. The RTM most likely will not act until March, so theoretically, April 1st, the next regular member will be seated. So it's really a question of timing. Back to this issue, should seniority as a practice weigh out over what our judgments are on skills? I don't think it's anything more than that, and so I disagree with your other assertion.
I didn't realize that Mr. Fox was interested in regulations. We have a group now that's working on regulations, and Mr. Fox had not become part of that. Mr. Maitland and Mrs. Raymer are.
Can I comment on that too? Mr. Chairman, in my opinion, it's more about than seniority. But like I said before, unless there is a valid reason, in my opinion, not to appoint a member in, fantastic standing that does have been seniority, then we are deviating for past practice. And the assumption is that, I heard from my two colleagues that Andy, about regulation improvement. The assumption is, how I'm hearing this, that somehow Nancy's not. And I've talked about that during my interview as well. I mean, so I don't know if that's
Nancy's very actively involved in that.
Question about that. I mean, in terms of, as I said, she's a renowned attorney. No question about her aptitude in looking at the regulations and finding ways to make improvements or clarity. That's one skill set. Mr. Fox is, as I see, and I had an opportunity to talk to him after I spoke with Mrs. Raymer the other day, and then subsequently talked to Mr. McRae as part of our interview process. Mr. Fox has actually had practical experience dealing with them, and so I think that's a judgment in terms of which are you going to apply sooner versus later. I mean, it's simply it's a simple judgment.
And then I would have, well, it's your call, and you guys are the people who run the town, and I'm just saying, I realize that all three people are very competent. Nick has huge experience, practical experience, working with regulations. He would, and Nancy always comments on how stuff isn't in English, and we got to get it so that it's simpler for people to follow, and she's been actively working on the more complex ones. So of the people that I've been working with, of the alternates, the two that have really been active in the regulation side to date have been Mr. McRae and Mrs. Raymer. again, I don't see the whole picture, and I understand that, but it is, what can I tell you? I feel like I feel.
No, I appreciate it, and I admire your work, too. You dedicated a lot of time as well. And that's the other thing, too, that we have to take into consideration, as all three of these individuals will ultimately advance into regular positions. Notably, I said Mr. Heller, we know for certainty, is going to not be seeking reappointment. He has said that. We'll need an alternate. All of the alternates at some point have been elevated up. I don't know the intentions of the other people, but we know that in terms of tenure, 16, Mr. Heller's up,
I'm up.
you're up, and then we go into, this position actually isn't even for a full 3 years, because it's actually filling Mr. Brooks's term, which is in 17, whereas whom goes into Mr. Heller's seat will be going in for 3 years. You know what I mean? So in a way, this is a partial term. Mr. Heller's will be a full 3-year term, based upon what our advisory committee tells us.
You know, I'm concerned, like I said, about precedents and whatnot, but that aside, I mean,
I'll go sit down now.
I'm concerned about precedents too, but that aside, as the chairman said, there's an opportunity here to my two colleagues to rethink this. If it is only 7 minutes, 7 months or 6 months, then we should be following precedents, and we should be promoting a well-respected member on both sides, when in fact, we're going to be, Andy or whoever will be back in front of this board again in 6 or 7 months anyway. That's the point. Why are we deviating when in 6 months down the road?
It's basically, that's the ultimate, it's the judgment as sort of
And I'm
timing.
imploring my two colleagues to really think this out, because this is not, I'll say this is not just about this appointment. So once again, I implore my two colleagues on the other side here to rethink this.
But, thank you. I have no other comment.
Nancy, do you want to speak or no? No? No.
Okay, the motion has been moved and seconded to appoint Mr. Fox to a term that would expire on 3/31/17. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Me.
So the motion is carried 2-1. Mr. Rosen, you will be notifying the RTM in accordance with the process of interviewing and so forth. The next item before us, is Nathaniel Witherell. Welcome, Leslie. Or not say welcome, thank you for staying. We have Nathaniel Witherell. Does anyone have a?
Yes, I'd like to place a nomination, Dr. Francis Ennis. Excuse me, I have a cold. Dr. Ennis is an orthopedic surgeon with ONS here in Greenwich. He specializes in the replacement of hips and knees. He's very interested in Nathaniel Witherell, and as I understand, when the new rehab center was opened at Nathaniel Witherell, he and his colleague, Dr. Kavanaugh, went up there and told the rehab center what they needed to do in order to properly see to the rehabilitation of patients. So he's a very big supporter of Nathaniel Witherell, and I think that he will be a wonderful addition to the board up there as they move forward.
Okay. A motion has been made for Dr. Francis Ennis. Is there a second?
There is.
Seconded by Mr. Marzullo. Discussion? I spoke with Dr. Ennis yesterday. I've not had the occasion to experience his work, but I've heard from a number of people how
I could attest to that.
how wonderful an orthopedist he is, and also the fact that he believes deeply in the Witherell and its care, and notably its short-term rehabilitation program. So I'm happy to support his nomination. And just to be clear, that is for a position, let's just find it. I believe, 3/31/2018. He will be, just to keep the record straight, Michael, if you could confirm this to Snack, he will be filling the position that Frank Scarpa vacated upon his term being concluded. So that just leaves, so all in favor, did we do that? All in favor of Dr. Ennis? Aye. So we have, Mr. Bankson, which I believe we're seeing.
I'm seeing him this afternoon.
Me too, sorry, yeah. And so Mr. Bankson, Mr. Ormsby, was acted upon, and then I believe that's it, although there is another vacancy that will be occurring, and that is Mr. Simon, who is serving presently on the Nathaniel Witherell Board. We have been advised, after further review of the charter section related to the retirement board for which Mr. Simon sits, that you cannot be another official of the town. So if he endeavors to remain on the retirement board, he has to vacate the Witherell. It's just, I think it's section 197. So that will result in another position opening. Are there any other nominations?
That's it.
Okay, if not, that concludes our business under item 6, nothing under item 7.
I don't think so, no.
And then item 8 is adjourned, and Michael, you said the next meeting,
Friday the 21st.
and do you know right now if there's any business?
Yeah, we have the Historic District Commission, and we have the resolution of the mooring.
Right, okay. Okay, so
The 20 what?
21st.
That's Friday the
Because
21st.
Thursday is West Coast.
Friday the 21st, okay.
Friday the 21st.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.